growing up in public. That is what our kids are doing today. That's what we're doing as adults. And Devorah Heitner PhD is going to help us navigate this world, and it ain't all fear-based on today's show. Devorah, hello. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
I am so excited to have this chat. We have a wonderful psychologist locally who helps us not be quite so freaked out about tech, who I've had on the show. And then I saw your book come up and watched a couple of your keynotes online. And I was like, oh my gosh, we need to flesh this subject out even more, because what I keep seeing is a whole lot of older generation fear, and we just want to put it in a box and put it away and keep everyone like banned and off, and like quite a few extreme energy words, I guess. And it reminded me,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
reminded me of Footloose, one of my favorite movies as a kid, and it was all about banning dancing. And I'm like, well, there's some really good things about dancing. So could there be some gray area around tech? And I was just, after seeing your book, I thought we have to discuss this. So, where did it become obvious to you that this was a nuanced topic, that you wanted to help people wade through the complexities of it and all the different kind of shades, if you like?
I used to teach college when I got out of my media studies graduate degree. So I studied television and media history and did a doctorate and wrote actually a book about that stuff. And then was teaching college. So I was teaching 18 to 22-year-olds, kind of when social media was really breaking out around 2006, 7, 8. And I saw my students really get very emotionally invested. And some of them had grown up with MySpace, some of them were using Facebook. Also, just texting really changed things. I remember the first younger people in my family who would want to text me, and I was like, "What is this texting? Why don't you just call?" Right? So I'm just old enough as a sort of younger Gen Xer that like my millennial cousins would want to text, and initially when I first was able to, I still didn't really get it. So I just wanted to understand, what are these people experiencing? What are kids experiencing? What are the milestones of growing up in the digital age? And then I also became a mother in 2009 while I was still teaching at the university level. So I had my 18 to 22-year-old undergraduate students. Then I had my own baby at home, and I was thinking about, should I be sharing his picture on Facebook? And so many other parents were asking me questions because I research on this topic. And I just recognize there's a real need for empathetic, curious conversations with kids on this topic, and kind of translation to adults so that caregivers and educators can really understand what kids are dealing with.
Yeah, 100%. It's the understanding piece. And you just can't know what the next generation is going to be hit with. And, I recently, as 7 months ago, said to a friend, oh, AI, do I really have to like figure that whole world out? And then now, 7 months later, I'm like using a couple of AI tools, and I'm like, there's some positives around this. But how do we actually mitigate the risks of the negative sides of things? And information is fascinating as a subject, let alone trying to dissect what is true, what is not, what is right, what is wrong. It seems to become harder and harder with the more two, three, four-way conversations we have online, right?
100%.
Mm. And so let's talk about this big push by lots of schools, governments, influencers, researchers to ban social media below 16. This is kind of getting tossed around a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
What's the voting age there?
Voting age here is 18.
Same for us. And so I think it's anti-democratic to keep kids off social until 16, because then you're really not giving them a very long time to learn the ropes before their voting age. So I think it's really important to think about, what do kids need to be prepared to be citizens? And if you're expected to be an adult at 18, for us, that's also, signing up for the draft. It's a lot of responsibility. It's legal responsibility for your own actions. It's being tried as an adult. Then to keep kids off of social media until they're 16 is giving them very few learning years to figure this out. And I also think it's silencing activists. We see a lot of 14 and 15-year-old activists around climate issues and other important global and local issues. And I don't want to not hear from them. I think if a 14-year-old has something to say, whether that's on Twitter X, whether that's Instagram, whether that's TikTok, I want to hear their voice.
Wow. Yeah, great perspective. And I feel like it's one that's not being heard as much at the moment, because we're so loudly saying, oh, this is terrible. And let's unpack what might be terrible. What do you see as the primary negative aspects of young kids on socials?
Okay, so obviously the social media world is a comparison machine, and kids are already wired to be comparing themselves to others. It's part of the tween and teen experience. It's part of growing up, whether or not you go to school or, kids are very developmentally wired to be looking at where am I in, where am I out, where am I included or excluded, how am I like everyone. Even if you have a kid who's like, I'm the weird kid, you better believe they care what the other weird kids think of how weird they are. When somebody says they don't care what anybody thinks, that's very likely to not be quite accurate, right? Especially if that person is a teenager. In general, humans care what other people think of us, though. And so let's come back to that because all of us care if we get likes, if we get responded to. But the fact that it's quantified on social media is at this exquisitely sensitive moment for teenagers is really tricky, right? It's hard enough to deal with all the external markers of popularity and acceptance and in-group, out-group stuff at school, whether you're sitting at the popular lunch table or whatever it is. And social media is going to really bring that home for you. You're going to see how many followers you have, how many likes you got on a certain post. And that's tricky. That is absolutely tricky stuff.
Yeah. And so what kinds of conversations should we be having with our kids around likes and followers? And because something that my son bandies about, and he just turned 15, is oh yeah, he's one of the cool kids. So like there's all these labels already that exist at school and that they're using. And he's already othered himself from being cool. And I'm like, well, you're just cool in your own way. Like, and your friends think you're cool. So like I sometimes think, oh gosh, am I getting the conversation wrong? What should I be saying? And when it comes to socials and growing up with people seeing your activity online and what you're posting and what you're sharing, um, I tend to think like fine to be on there, but maybe just be a bit of an observer the first couple of years rather than feeling like you have to do anything.
I mean, I think being an observer is actually to some degree kind of painful though on social. I would love kids' voices. So, I mean, I think it's important that we balance our kind of stalker side with the sort of silent stalker side of social media where we're browsing other people's lives with sharing and also recognize like, is this actually bringing me connection, bring us that joy, right? So I do think it's important for kids to have some balance in their lives, to have in-person time. I always wish like our town doesn't really have a central place where kids can hang out a little bit, the library, but there's not like a skate park or the beach or,
We don't have
and
that
I think it's a
either.
problem.
It's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a problem because I think the kids need a place to just drop by and see if anybody's hanging out. And that place is kind of online. And I wish that there was a little bit more in-person sort of space that was welcoming and accessible and free, that didn't cost money, right? That didn't have barriers, where kids aren't over-policed and criminalized as well. I think it's really important. And if I'm talking to a kid about likes, I just want to emphasize to them how much the algorithms and the design features of social media can be manipulative, right? It's important for kids to understand that because sometimes we can tap into adolescence wanting to be smarter than the designers, right? The fact that they know they're smarter than you, right? Your 15-year-old knows, he knows way more. I have a 15-year-old too. I'm sure he knows
So much
way more,
more.
so much more.
Mm,
But they also want to feel like they're smarter than Meta or they're smarter than TikTok or they're smarter than YouTube. And that is helpful if they understand the design features and then they realize, oh, hey, I still want my life. Like I don't want my whole life to be scrolling YouTube.
mm, yeah.
So I recognize the algorithm's going to send me more of the same things that I like, but at a certain point, I'm going to turn it off, take a break, go do something else that fits my goals, fits my interests.
Fits my goals, fits my interests is huge, right? And having enough time away from tech and away from watching everybody do stuff that you actually get to do things and kick goals yourself. So, do you see that as being a key thing to notice and plan for, discuss, and help kids understand the difference between watching and
Say
doing?
that again. So understand the difference between like
Watching
what
and
they really
doing.
care about,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think we do want to really be thinking about like creating versus consuming. We want to be thinking about how can we be an author in this space, a creator in this space. And sometimes we are just going to be consuming, but then are we consuming something that fills us, with joy? Maybe it's just like a silly cat video, but it's fun. But at a certain point, if I'm just scrolling real estate and feeling bad that I forgot to be a zillionaire, or if I'm scrolling other people's vacations and I feel bad that I didn't get to do something like that this summer, that's not as helpful as thinking about what's aspirational out there, what's helpful, what ideas am I getting that I can use in my own life, and then what's my commitment to making sure I spend as much time implementing this in my life. Like you can search productivity tools all day, for example, but like, what's your plan for actually producing something with them?
What is your plan? So true. I noticed he was watching a lot of cooking videos, my boy. And I was like, what are you going to cook? And then it was just like a little light came on. It's like, oh, yeah, I could start copying these chefs and I could start like bringing this into my kitchen. And it created a love for cooking Asian cuisine that we benefit from very regularly, and I'm very happy about. So I really
That
think
is a great example. Exactly. And we can follow our kids' interests and do a little facilitating. Like maybe your kid is really into cooking, but he's never been to the grocery store. I mean, I'm not, your kid probably knows how to buy groceries, but here, in the US, I know a lot of kids who like are pretty clueless about buying groceries. So it's like, how can you kind of build on that and say, okay, well, so you want that to make that tofu curry, like here's what you need to go do first. And then what tools do you need for that? How can you prepare for it? How can you clean up? Right. And but what a delicious way, literally, to kind of explore your interests. And he's also going to be a very popular roommate at university
I
with
know.
that hobby.
He's already talking about like if I get a jaffle maker and an air fryer, I can actually make meals and sell them because I hear the cafeterias are terrible. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's quite entrepreneurial. Love that.
Yeah, I think our kids also are literally entrepreneurial too. A lot of kids are making businesses, and my one of my cousins is building stuff on Etsy that she's selling, and there are all kinds of online marketplaces. Again, we want to make sure that kids are, financially literate before they go into becoming a seller in these spaces. We want to make sure they're of an age where it's legal to do that. They may need to set up their account with you. But what a great experience to see that they can create something that people want and make, make a small business as a young person. Again, this is why I think to limit, sort of all online interaction for the under 16s is a very limiting idea, because it really does keep kids from doing things like online entrepreneurship. And again, that's not saying kids should just step into it, a young age without adult supervision and mentorship, but I also don't think we should block that channel completely.
100%. And so the message I'm hearing that I really like is just no phones during school time at all, like none. Can't go into the bag, can't check your phone, can't check your socials. You are here to be here and to learn and to connect. Like that one I like. What are your thoughts on that?
I do really like a lot of the spaces that kids hang out in. I mean, it just depends, right? It depends how they're using it. I mean, Discord is a space that I see a lot of kids using in positive ways, but I have heard negative stories. Any app, any online space, even something like Roblox, can be positive or it can be negative. There can be bullying or there can be things that are really cool happening in there. So we want to equip kids with strategies for getting out of a difficult interaction. We want to make sure our kids know that they're allowed to leave if somebody's being mean. This is so huge because kids think they have to be nice. If someone's being mean to you online, with like skedaddle, close out of the window. You can report them if you want to, but the most important thing is to take care of yourself by getting out of the situation.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so something I've been noticing a lot just being out and about is young girls taking really sexy pictures of themselves really, really young. So, like we could say that is over sexualizing at a very young age before you're actually having any intimate activity. And that is something a lot of parents of girls are really worried about. So, what are your thoughts in that particular space, and what kinds of conversations could we be having with our girls, especially? I don't see boys doing it as much, but the girls are like setting themselves up with full photo shoots on beaches, kind of thing.
I mean, here's the thing. There is appearance pressure on kids of all genders, and social media definitely is a factor in that appearance pressure, and so is other media like movies and other things. But social media definitely adds to it, and kids of all genders are being photographed more. But undoubtedly, these pressures fall most acutely on girls, and we see all the time the results of it. I mean, I was just looking at an admitted student's Instagram on a university page, and like there were several young people who were like, here's a picture of me in my bra on like admitted students page. Like I'm going to meet the other kids from my university and I'm going to present myself in my underwear. And I was like, okay, that's a profound choice, of like all the ways you could introduce yourself. This isn't like you're changing in front of your roommate and you're having a
Yeah,
moment
yeah.
where you're wearing clothes. This is like, hi, here I am for everyone to see. And I mean, I think that there are a lot of great folks writing in from a feminist perspective about parenting, in this moment and sort of figuring out that piece between the sort of bodily empowerment and we're not afraid or embarrassed or ashamed of our bodies, but also how much our kids consciously or unconsciously reiterating actually very sexist tropes when they take certain kinds of pictures of themselves or when they feel like they're doing something that, a partner would want, or, even being influenced by pornography, frankly, and the ways that they're self-presenting. So I'm just going to say that that is territory well worth thinking about. And I would refer you to like Peggy Orenstein. Joanne Finkelstein has a great new book coming out in a couple of weeks called Sexism and Sensibility. I'm going to look at the subtitle, but it's a very smart take, raising empowered, resilient girls in the modern world. Like these are important conversations, and to just really listen to your daughter if she's talking about, oh, that bikini selfie makes me feel really empowered. And to try to not come from a shame-based, place, but also to talk about safety and to talk about, what other opportunities there are to represent yourself so that people can connect with you beyond just your body and the way your body looks. And I think it's also important to understand that the competitive dynamics that can happen between kids, like if I post my bikini selfie and my friend posts her bikini selfie and then she gets more likes, how's that going to leave me feeling? And so these are just all really tricky scenarios. And this is where I really respect the young women who are pushing back against dress codes, especially when they're being enforced sometimes in a racially biased way or in a body biased way, where like two kids can wear the same thing and one kid has a very different figure than the other and she's getting sent home for dress code and the other kid is allowed to wear the same thing. And I think it is an issue that young women tend to feel really strongly about, and I really respect that. I think at the same time, as a parent, we can see what our kids are wearing and be like, or see the ways they're presenting themselves. And so I just think it's important to keep that line of communication open and to recognize too that kids are trying on these different personas. And when they're trying on a more sexual persona, even if they're not, as you say, like or in relationships, like, trying it on, right? And it's an identity at school. We showed a difference or that like gesture. Well, that's not for me. That's for the sort of kids at school or whatever. And you might be like, whoa, whoa, that's not how I want you to present to the kids at school. But I think it's important to recognize that kids are kind of code switching all the time and they're experimenting with different aspects of their identity. And some kids also feel like it's very safe to present themselves in a more sexual way online. I wrote a chapter for growing up in public about sexting,
Yeah, I was
and
just about to
people
ask you
send
about
each
that
other
because it,
nudes. They'll send each other nudes, and we are like, as parents, so worried, and the legal ramifications in most places, and the safety ramifications. So, but it's very important to talk about safety, self-respect, and privacy with our kids, and also recognize that they may need to come to us if they're in a situation where someone might have, like if we want our kids to be able to come to us, if someone might have a video of them or a photo of them, that they later realize, compromises their safety or compromises their privacy, or maybe they even realize it at the time, but someone's using it in a way that is threatening or coercive. It's really important for kids to know that they can come and talk to us and that they have options. And if we've just scared them about sexting to the point where they won't even come to us, then they're actually much more vulnerable to exploitation.
Yeah, so preemptive conversations around awareness rather than just kind of hoping it doesn't happen and kicking the conversation down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a heartbreaking post from a dad recently whose son had taken his life, and the genesis of that happening was a sexed picture that was then distributed. And he just never got over the shame of it. And he was teased constantly. And his goodbye note was, "I'm sorry I let you down." And it was just, and the dad never, like, he was trying to fix it all and help him move on. And like, he was so supportive. And it just killed him that his son still felt that way in the last seconds of his life. And I was just crying reading this, thinking, oh my God, it is literally a parent's worst nightmare. These kids are just trying to navigate the world, trying on intimacy with their first boyfriends and girlfriends and what that looks like in 2024. And in the moment, probably thought, oh, probably a bit cheeky, but I'll do it. She's done it. And then the haunting of that one tiny moment, right?
Oh my goodness.
Horrible.
Do you all
And
watch Heartbreak High? Or I know that's kind of extreme, but I've been watching Heartbreak High. Is it?
no, I haven't watched it, but it'd probably
Okay,
be a
well,
good
so it's an
way to kind of get
Australian
in touch.
series.
Yeah. Oh, you
Yeah, it's an
mean, hold
Australian
on,
series that's
hold
been
on.
remade.
Okay, I watched the original because I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. Yeah, I didn't know there was a new
And so
one.
they've remade it, and it's all about kind of sexual politics of high school.
Mm.
And it's pretty explicit. And I think it's really, I mean, I think a lot of teenagers would watch it and be like, whoa, that's really explicit. It's, that's more than going on in my high school, but it's TV, but it's fun because it also does take on, queerness and different kinds of relationships. And the kids talk a lot about things like masturbation, which it would have been very taboo. Like when I mean, I also am a child of the 80s, and like, no, TV did not go there.
Mm-mm. Yeah. And do you think so it would be healthy to watch a show like that, even if it is more explicit than the conversations you're having right now with your teen? Do you think
I
these can
wouldn't
be
watch that one with my kid. I think that would
okay?
be cringy. But I have watched other shows like The Magicians, or I don't know. I mean, it really depends. Like I have a kid where I can watch, more adult content with, like, especially if there's now like violence or other things. I mean, we're sort of, the filters are off, right? He's in 10th grade, he's 15. But if it was something super sexual about teenagers, I feel like that would be weird, and that neither of us would be happy watching that together.
Oh yeah, no, we are definitely well into the stage of can we please fast forward the sex scenes if we're watching some like like a movie and there happens to be a love interest and yeah, it's too cringe. Absolutely agree.
And I
But
think that's fair for everyone involved.
yeah, and so would watching Heartbreak High as a parent of a teen be a good way for us to kind of almost just raise our awareness about the landscape of today? Because I think a good show and good writing can actually bring those sorts of themes of the time to life really well when you didn't grow up that way. And half the battle is coming to this social media landscape from a place of curiosity, concern, and conversation rather than discipline and shut down and oh, that's you over there doing that and just don't do it for too long. Like I feel like we're not
I think it would probably reassure you about your own kid, because that show is a little extreme, or like something
okay.
like Sex Education, the UK show, which is also kind of extreme.
Yeah.
Um, might like might be a lot for some parents. I mean, I think if you have a kid who hasn't dated at all and then you watch Heartbreak High, you're gonna be like, what is going, like, is this what it's like? And the answer is, this is TV, but it's coming from a place of thinking about what it's like to be young. I mean, on the other side, another UK show, Heartstopper, which is this very sweet gay romantic story that I've written a little bit about, in relation to texting, where you see the love interests start texting each other, and you also see how the friend group texts. And I think that, it's based on a graphic novel, and the author, Alice Oseman, is very young. And I think she really captures this sort of tentative feeling of like just texting someone for the first time and like waiting for the response bubble and seeing the little response window, and then like it shuts down and they're thinking about what
Oh,
to say, and you're like, what do you
torture.
say? And it is.
Ah,
I think that's very relatable. So I would say like Heartstopper, and maybe some people could. I know families that have watched Heartstopper together. Again, not for my kid, too romantic, but just not of interest. He doesn't really like teen shows at all, actually. But I think Heartstopper you could watch with your kids if you have a different kid than my
we
kid.
have a different
You can watch
kid.
other romantic things, where, but and it's a very sweet, like the friend groups are very sweet and supportive on that show. Whereas there's like a lot of betrayal, honestly, in Heartbreak High and some of these other shows, which is very real for teens and I think relatable as well. And you see kids sort of get canceled, like saying and doing the wrong thing and kind of having a lot of people shun them, which is kids' like worst fear. This is why I wrote Growing Up in Public, is because this idea of something you say or do gets videoed or photographed, and then it gets chilly, and then you're sort of out. You've sort of like lost, in society, because you've done this bad thing, you've made this transgression. And I think, in some ways in the digital age, there are kids who are kind of living in fear of some kind of transgression that is going to get them canceled. And I think we need to help. We don't want to teach kids that what they do, they're not accountable at all. And what they do doesn't matter, because it does matter. And if you harm someone else, you should be accountable. At the same time, we also don't want to teach kids that any little mistake of their friends is something they should pounce on and videotape. Like before you videotape your friend when she's like drunk or just had dental work and she's out of it saying stupid stuff, like maybe think about, like, would I want someone to do that to me? Is this a good idea? Is this the kind of friend I want to be, or the kind of peer or classmate I want to be? Do I want to live in a world where people are gotchaing each other with this kind of thing?
Yeah, and you bring up gotcha moments in the book really well, I think. And the sharing of things that you wouldn't want shared about yourself is just such a, I mean, really, we've just got to think of the basic principles of being a good human and ushering our kids to reflect and think consequentially. And big tech almost doesn't let us have that as our default because it favors sensationalism and gotcha and outrage and pitting people against each other. So it's almost like you have to really teach kids that that is actually how it's geared, but that's not how being a good human looks.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, a good friend actually writes to their friend and says that post is doesn't you don't want to have that out there. Like, what are you doing? Take it down. Like that's what a good friend would do.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think there's just there's so much to unpack, Devorah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the next question I want to ask you is around socializing, like socializing in person, because sometimes my son says things to me about what a kid has said to another kid or what someone's done to him, and it almost feels like sometimes, and I don't know if I've got the read on this wrong, because I'm fully putting my hand up as Gen X and now firmly separated from this brave new world that our kids are joining. But at the same time, it sounds like they haven't had enough practice in person. It sounds like they haven't been checked
I agree. I agree. I know. I think
enough.
kids do need more practice in person. I think
Mm,
we need to make more space, whether it's
yeah.
having more lunch time at school, and maybe it is like incentivizing kids to put down their phones in some ways, and like, whether it's just like having, I mean, I sort of fantasize about a place like Sydney having like a lot of open space at school, but like here it's cold year round and the kids are like in the building all day and they're in this huge cafeteria. There's no like volleyball happening at lunch or anything. But I wish there was because I think that kids need things to do. And even like we don't do recess at the high school level, but I think kids need that kind of social time during the school day because that's when they are together physically in the same place, right? When they go home, it's hard for them to get them like back out again. And again, that may be my experience because I'm in the suburbs. But it's really important to give kids opportunities to be together and interact. I mean, I've even seen, kids like all sitting and they're the lifeguards here at the beach where they're not the one on duty. Those guys aren't on the phone, thank goodness. But like the kids who are sort of on waiting in the wings and they're all the time on their phones. And I'm like, guys, what if, someone
You're
was there?
there. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that there seems to be almost a parent activist advocacy opportunity here to create more communal spaces with a sense of purpose. Like, roll out a few more ping pong tables at the local park or a skate ramp or, it's something we've been thinking about a lot because my son has to take a bus 20 minutes away to the nearest basketball hoop to shoot some hoops and practice. Or you have to pay $35 if you want to play tennis. Or, and so barriers to entry, you don't want to send them to the mall because then it's kind of enforcing a what I don't have versus the one kid who gets given the $100 and then makes everybody jealous because they buy a couple of things and it's all about them. Like I think it's a really interesting thing to be a lot more intentional about as a parent. That's what I feel like we're being called to do. And to think about how we can reach out to local politicians and say, we don't have anywhere to send our kids to hang out that's safe.
We can incentivize our kids. I mean, I will say, like, my kid likes to play video games. He's not super, like, he's not a gamer, like, that's not his biggest thing, but it is a way that he hangs out with friends. And sometimes I'll say, like, you can game, but you got to game with other people, or you can game, but you have to, like, go have somebody over and do it in person. So I think it's okay to kind of incentivize our kids. I mean, that said, I don't think the answer is just taking away the tech, and especially if we haven't created spaces. I'm really wary of anyone who thinks there's a simple, I'm really wary of anyone who thinks there's a simple solution to this because I don't think it's so simple. I don't think we just take away the phones and then the kids just magically socialize. I think there are a lot of factors keeping kids from hanging out in person, and we need to work with our kids to kind of figure it out and help them find ways to be together that they enjoy and that work for them. And as you say, that don't have these economic and social barriers like the mall. We certainly used to hang out at the mall, but then, it wasn't great. I mean, I grew up in suburbia in the 80s and the mall had a lot of problems and we would go bother our friends who worked at the mall. That probably wasn't great.
Probably
Some
not
kids
great
would
for their
shoplift.
job.
That wasn't really pro-social behavior, right? So there's like a lot of problems at the mall. But it was sort of a place to see and be seen and all of that, right? And then we would go downtown. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, so we would go into Manhattan and we'd walk around and, but we really didn't have a lot of money. So we'd kind of walk around until we ran out of money completely and then we'd have to go home, right? But my kid did not go into Chicago the way I went into New York, and I wish that he would. So I
Mm.
think, and some of it is also like, what are we doing to make sure public transit is safe? What are we doing to teach kids how to use it? I will say he's gotten a lot more independent on his bike in the last couple of years. And that was a real intention from my family where we're like, my husband's a cyclist and we're like, we're going to teach you how to get from point A to point B. Like if you need a ride somewhere and it's 3 miles away, like you're going to bike there. It's not 20 miles. It doesn't involve a highway. Like you can get there and we don't need to be involved. And then you can leave when you want to leave and you're not stuck waiting around.
Mm. I'm doing some root cause thinking as I'm hearing the subjects that we're talking about develop. And while I absolutely am pro women and men being able to choose big careers and push, push, push and go and create amazing things in the world, I do remember as a kid myself, economically, the middle class thrived a lot more. It meant that having to work was not like a crazy necessity for every single double parent situation. And there was always a mum like hanging around. Even if a few mums were working, there was always one or two that were like making the snacks and letting all the kids hang out. And I almost feel like the evaporation of middle class and the kind of necessity, the forced, everybody has to work because that's the only way we can make it work. can play a bit of a role in a lack of socialization in our kids and the screen being relied upon as a bit of a babysitter.
And I also
Like,
think the kids, when they're older, will seek out the house that doesn't have somebody's mom. Like there's always somebody's mom or dad who is home or works from home now, because a lot of us work from home now. But I think, my kid and his friends are not up to anything bad, but they'll still go to the house where there's more space or more space away from the adults. Like, because my husband and I both work from home, this is not necessarily the most desirable, place to
uh-huh.
hang out.
Well, yeah, I guess I was thinking maybe more of the younger set where like thinking back to what we were talking about, God, have these kids actually socialized enough? They're saying things without filters all the time and they're now 15. I kind of saw myself as like a maybe 8 to 10 year old, just constantly hanging out with friends in the safety of a home that always had a parent there. Um,
And it is important to see the impact of what you say. If kids are being like unkind to each other on, Discord or YouTube, and they need to know like, hey, that sounds a little different when you say it out loud, or, and again, when kids make jokes about ethnicity or whatever, maybe that feels safe to do in your friend group, but you have to be really careful about doing that and
yeah,
really thoughtful and recognize too that it might get taken out of context.
yeah, 100%. Um, FOMO is something I saw you talking about the other day online, and I wanted to explore that because one of the aspects of socials that really does get a lot of kids down is maybe you didn't get invited to the party, and then you're watching. Like in the 80s, if I didn't get invited to the party, it was just a moment, an hour or two where I might have been sad and shitty and kind of move on and go on to do something else. But now the kid knows that they have their sad, shitty moment, and then they have to watch the freaking live updates of the party, stream across them.
It's so brutal. Oh my
It is
gosh, there's like
brutal.
hardly
Yeah.
anything more brutal than like watching a party that you're not invited to, like just like
Hmm.
transpire online. And I would hope that the kid would just put away their phone and do something else. And kids tell me that they do, that they know that they should like go read a book or see other friends. And my favorite group of 11-year-olds I ever talked to said, "What would you do if this happened?" And they were like, "Just invite another friend over and then take a picture so you look like you have a
Oh,
life."
I love
Which is
that.
like a very honest answer.
So it's almost
But
a
even if
resilience building opportunity in that
yeah,
case. Yeah. Like what could you
it
do
can
that
be,
you
but
could
it
post?
is rough. It would have been
Mm,
rough for me because I was definitely not a popular kid. It would have been
neither.
rough.
Mm, yeah. And so what you mentioned kids that you speak to, what are some of the things kids are saying to you that you're as a researcher on the topic, you have a PhD, you obviously found things in that research, and that's culminated in this brilliant book. Is there anything kids have told you that you thought, wow, I really didn't think about that? Or, oh, I didn't even see that being a problem as both a researcher and a parent on the topic?
I've learned that texting is more kind of important and complicated than we realize, and we need to do more as educators and parents to help kids with texting. So that's a
Hmm.
big, and group texts, especially early in like the middle grades, can be really tricky. So we tend to focus on social media, but we should be thinking also about texting. And games are a really important social space for kids, whether it's like Roblox and Minecraft or other games that maybe older kids are playing. So it's just good to understand that these are social spaces for our kids. And I think the kids are smarter than we realize though too about the ways social media can be manipulative. I'm not saying that they don't need more education about those design factors that I talked about, but they're also not dupes. They do recognize like, oh, I'm being sold a certain vision of the world or a certain vision of, what my body should look like. Whether they're, feeling bad about themselves in relation to that, even though they know that they're being manipulated is a different question. But kids are aware that the algorithm can be manipulative and pushed back right, by liking things that will be more positive, try to control their online experience and have a better experience online.
Yeah, absolutely. Such valid points. And so, as a parent of a 15-year-old, what does healthy social media and texting conversation look like? I think that would probably be a great place to finish so people can get some little ideas of things they can start chatting about. Like, in terms of how often you check in with your kid or how much you make sure that you're seeing in terms of shared access and things like that. What does it look like for you?
I think it's important to be honest with your kid if you are looking at their texts and other things to be really honest about that and talk about what you're looking for and why, and not try to be covertly monitoring them. And then ideally, you're backing off from monitoring over time as your kid grows and becomes more independent. So, you know, some like if you're monitoring a new user who's maybe in middle school or junior high school, that's one thing, and let them know what you're looking for and why. And maybe you're looking at it actually with them and helping them kind of think about, oh, I see this person responded this way. What do you think about that choice? Asking them their opinion. And then as time goes on, you're backing off from that level of monitoring and just encouraging them to come to you if certain things come up, and asking them, some theoreticals like, how would you troubleshoot if everyone's saying, hey, let's restart the group text without so and so, or if people are talking in a cruel way about a teacher, like what would you do? And just like, what are your options? And it's good for kids to remember there's always the option to just leave a conversation. You don't always have to be an upstander and put on your superhero cape. Sometimes leaving the conversation is just a really powerful and healthy choice.
That is so important. I really feel leaving a conversation is a healthy choice. And I think if our kids know that, then it's like leaving a situation. Like, what's the code word for me picking you up from the party? We need them to realize that the party is happening on social as well, and they can exit anytime they want.
100%. Yeah, and that we're there for them and that we recognize that sometimes there are really toxic things going on in the community and it's not your kid's fault when that's happening. So I think it's also important to say, you're not judging them, you're not judging their whole friend group just because sometimes a conversation goes in a negative direction. That's something that happens.
Mm. And and so in that, how much should our kids be empowered to stand up to things that they don't see going well? Like, because in person, you'd say, mate, just stop doing that to him, that he doesn't deserve that. That's what I teach my kid to do, like stand up for people who are being victimized and so online, is that a grayer area?
I think the way you respond when someone's being mean to someone in person, you have a similar set of options online. Like another thing you can do is have affinity with the target. So even if you're in a situation where you're on the subway and someone's harassing someone, you can sit next to that person, you can see how they're doing, and if it's at school, like maybe you don't feel safe, like maybe there's a physical altercation brewing and you feel like I'm not in a physical place where I can defend this person, but maybe you like start another conversation. Or maybe if it's online, you reach out to the person who was targeted and say, are you okay? That wasn't really okay. What happened there? So maybe you confront the bully. I would say online in a group text situation, I wouldn't necessarily confront them publicly. I would go to them one-to-one and say, I didn't like what you said there. If you do it publicly, most people will respond by doubling down and getting defensive. So most people don't respond well to being publicly corrected.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much to think about. Um, in writing the book and in your PhD, what do you think the most important thing we can do as parents with our kids growing up in public?
I think it's the most important thing is to stay curious, stay in the conversation, keep listening to them, keep checking in. And also, it's really important to model positive behavior on our own social media and with our own phone, including putting it away and having a sense of humor about the ways we might feel manipulated by tech.
And sharing our negative experiences
Yeah. And positive experiences
and
too.
positive. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Devorah, thank you for the work you do to advocate for the nuanced conversation around growing up in public. I think staying curious about a new generation and how they're operating, connecting, what they're finding difficult is so key. And I really value your voice in not making it all doom and gloom, but actually in raising awareness about how this could look good, better, and what we need in the physical world to balance out that time that we spend online in public. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing with us.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to talk with you about this topic, and I hope parents and folks listening who have kids in their lives will have good conversations about this stuff with the kids in your life. Hopefully there's some good conversations in your future because kids have a lot to say about this topic.
And that is definitely the main thing that came out for me about everything we talked about is stay curious and talk with them more, not at them, but with them. Learn. I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.